Now we have Gerry Fung of Northbridge, Inc., who will talk about the different types of government grants that are available for our businesses.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to my presentation. My name is Gerry Fung. I'm a partner at Northbridge Consultants. We're a firm that consults with small to medium enterprises and some large multinationals on government funding programs in Canada. So I've been working with Northbridge for about 17 years now, assisting small to medium enterprises access government grants, tax credits, and loans from the Canadian side of things. I deal specifically with manufacturers and technology firms. My colleague Shireen was supposed to be here today, and she deals more with not-for-profits, so unfortunately she couldn't make it. So I'll talk mainly about manufacturers and technology firms today. So I'll give you a brief introduction for the next couple of minutes about government funding, and then I'll spend 5 minutes on pre-revenue opportunities and 5 minutes on post-revenue or government funding opportunities for profitable companies. In terms of government funding, the Canadian government is a very generous government when it comes to supporting small to medium enterprises. This is compared to the United States, where there's not much government funding available. There's a lot of incentive to situate your company in Canada to leverage these non-dilutive funding opportunities from the Canadian and provincial governments. Typically, from a government funding perspective, if you want to take advantage of government funds, you have to be aware of the fact that there are 4 priorities that the government typically looks for when it comes to funding small to medium enterprises. To apply for government funding, you typically have to fall into one of these 4 priorities. And they typically start with pre-revenue companies. Pre-revenue companies, the government often helps with R&D funding through innovation initiatives, and also workforce development, and that's training and hiring grants. Right? As your company begins to grow and you start to become profitable, the government then will kick in with some expansion grants, right? Business growth opportunities to help your profitable company grow globally and become even more profitable. And of course, there's some sector-specific opportunities as well for that the government likes to target. Nevertheless, there are 2 types of government funding that I will talk about, one being indirect tax credits and the other being direct funding in terms of grants and loans. For indirect tax credits, these are entitlement programs that reimburse you for eligible expenditures at the end of the year. One of the most generous incentive programs of its kind is the Scientific Research Experimental Development Program. That's a tax credit for R&D expenditures. That's very, very generous in Canada compared to the rest of the world, for example. The advantage of tax credits is that they're entitlement programs, so you don't have to apply per se. You just have to make sure you record the eligible expenditures and apply at with your tax return at the end of the year. You submit a claim with your tax return. So the government doesn't pick winners with tax credits. You're just entitled to the refund as long as you can prove that you're eligible or that you have eligible expenditures. On the other hand, you also have direct funding through grants and loans. And the difference is that with grants and loans, they're cost-sharing programs. You have to apply for funding before you incur the expenditures for approval, and then you get reimbursed as you incur the expenditures. The challenge with direct funding is that there are small windows of opportunities to apply for these grants because they're not entitlement programs. They're sometimes have small windows of eligibility that they will accept applications for. And they're not entitlement programs, so you're not guaranteed funding. You can apply and there could be no budget left to fund your project, for example. So I'm going to talk about indirect and direct funding mechanisms for several types of businesses, whether it be pre-revenue or it be a profitable company in the coming slides. But before I do that, quick comment about the political atmosphere for government funding programs, both on the federal and provincial side. On the federal side, the Liberals have recently launched the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Economic Development, and that's under your very own MP Navdeep Bains. So a lot of the government growth initiatives to help companies to scale have been really captured under this new ministry. On the provincial side, on the other hand, there's not much going on, unfortunately, because the Premier, Doug Ford, has frozen business support programs until the fall of 2019, upon which he's supposed to announce something about a new Open for Jobs blueprint. So until then, we're all just waiting to see what will happen on the provincial side. Okay, I'm going to start with some examples of government funding initiatives now, starting with pre-revenue opportunities, which typically focus on innovation and workforce development. And then afterwards, I'll spend 5 minutes quickly on government funding initiatives for profitable companies, which tend to focus more on scale up and growth. On the pre-revenue side, the most pertinent funds tend to encourage small to medium enterprises to invest in innovation. And one of the pillars of this initiative is a SHRED, Scientific Research Experimental Development Program, which pretty much gives you a tax credit if you invest in eligible research and experimental development activities, provided you do it in Canada. Right? There's no tax credit for outsourced development. So if you're only doing it in Canada, you can apply for this tax credit as long as you make a claim with your tax return within 18 years after the fiscal year end. Now, this is a very generous program because it provides a 35% refundable tax credit for small businesses, right? Even if you're pre-revenue, you can still get this tax credit refunded to you regardless of your profitability or your tax situation. The only caveat is as you become more profitable and you become a larger enterprise, you lose the refundability of the tax credit and it becomes a non-refundable tax credit, which is a bit smaller in terms of size of incentive. So if you're starting up a business, the first thing you usually leverage in Canada is the SHRED tax credit to reimburse all your labor and material expenditures spent on R&D. The next program that small businesses often leverage is called the Industrial Research Assistance Program, or IRAP for short. This is a grant for innovation, for R&D, that can provide you with up to $250,000 to help you commercialize your research or experimental development work, right? They're really looking for you to enter the market to continue to invest to build a sellable product. Right, so this is a very generous program in Canada that supports early stage companies as well. Next on my list is Ontario Centres of Excellence, which I highly recommend you look into if you have an early stage company in Ontario, because OCE really helps to encourage collaboration with universities and colleges. Right, they want you to hire interns from these institutions, and also to contract them to do your research and development, for which they will give you grant money to subsidize those expenditures. So it really encourages public-private partnerships in the academic world and helps to accelerate research and development in Canada. I did talk about the new Ministry of Innovation, Science, and Economic Development, and there's many programs under this ministry, one of which is the new Innovation Solutions Canada, which is a relaunch of the BCIP program, which was a government procurement program. Under this new manifestation, it encourages you to answer government challenges. These are critical challenges in technology, be it medical device challenges or challenges in artificial intelligence. And if you're willing to work on these challenges and put together a proposal, you can get funding directly from the federal government, $150,000 for a prototype or $1 million in funding to further develop your prototype. And then upon which the government could be your first customer under this new Innovation Solutions Canada. So if you're thinking of selling the government, this is a great direction to go towards as an early stage company. And then finally, there's training grants as well. I won't go into too much detail on these, but programs like Yves Landry AIM help to subsidize training on technology. There will be another intake for Yves Landry later this year. And finally, there's the Federal Canada Jobs Grant, which helps you to train your employees to develop their skill sets. And there's a lot of interest in this program to help develop your employees on personal training or develop their career path. Okay, I'm going to finish off talking about some opportunities for government funding for profitable and revenue-generating companies. I'm just going to briefly go through these. But since this is a women's conference, I thought I'd briefly talk about the Women Entrepreneurship Fund, which is a new initiative under the ministry, the ISED ministry. This was a first fund of its kind. I think the Liberals awarded $20 million to this fund, and it's been consumed in the last year. But it did provide up to $100,000 non-repayable funding for you to scale your business if you're a female entrepreneur globally, to grow it in terms of profitability. So this was a very popular fund. The $20 million was incurred very quickly, and we're hoping that the Liberals might relaunch this in the near future. Right? Unfortunately, it's not open for application right now, but something to keep an eye on. Another initiative under the strategic, under the ISED ministry, the Liberal Ministry of Economic Development, is the Strategic Innovation Fund, which is great for large multinationals, but more interest would be under FedDev, which is umbrellaed under ISED, called the Business Scale-Up and Productivity. And what this fund really does is it helps revenue-generating companies to grow internationally, to grow their revenue, to conduct plant expansions, building expansions, retrofitting equipment, that kind of project. They will finance up to 50% of an eligible project cost with an interest-free loan, right? It's a repayable loan, but on very generous terms. I'm going to conclude by talking a bit about government funding opportunities for profitable companies. I'm not sure if you're aware, but if you're a profitable company in Canada and you're attending trade shows internationally, there's ample government funding opportunities available for that to subsidize up to 50% of your cost. This can be under the Provincial Export Market Access Program, which isn't open right now, unfortunately, because of the Premier freezing incentive programs. But there's also the Federal Can Export Program, which is open for application right now, which I highly recommend all of you look at. You can also claim things like market research cost, direct contact visits, in addition to trade shows, under programs like this, and get some subsidies from the government to help you grow internationally. And then one more thing I'd like to talk about is on the provincial end. They do have a vast array of business expansion, business growth programs, which are reevaluating right now, one of which is the Southwestern Ontario Development Fund, which is will be reviewed in the upcoming fall, and also other programs as type. I won't go into too much further detail because these provincial programs aren't open right now, unfortunately. So I'm just going to wrap up a bit by telling you a bit about Northbridge Consultants and what we do. We are a 27-year-old practice, and we've been helping small to medium enterprises in Ontario now to leverage multiple government funding opportunities to optimize returns from government funding in general. We offer a turnkey solution, which starts by engaging to identify eligible funding opportunities for various businesses to ensure that there's viable projects that fits government parameters, and then to help frame your upcoming activities to make them fit government funding programs or their priorities. After which we will help all of our clients apply for government funding. We'll submit business plans, we'll put together pro forma financials, we'll put together projections and metrics and deliverables for the government. And then finally, Northbridge also helps with audit and reporting, because every time you apply for government funding, there's always a reconciliation process. It's not sufficient just to apply. There's a lot of time spent, which a lot of companies don't realize, just reporting back to the government to reconcile expenditures incurred, to reconcile the metrics that have been achieved. So pretty much, I'll stick around for a bit. Does anyone have any questions about government funding? That's all the material I prepared today. Yes, Ramesh?
You indicated that there is funding available as a repayable loan, interest-free loan.
Yeah.
What the women here would like to know, what are the grants available in non-repayable?
Non-repayable loans, right? So I guess Ramesh's question is about, are there any specific opportunities I would recommend to female entrepreneurs that are non-repayable in nature? And my answer to that question is yes. The biggest funds, especially at the federal level, tend to be for loans, right? However, in terms of non-repayable grants, they tend to target smaller businesses. So those are your innovation grants, such as IRAP or your SHRED tax credits. And those tend to be your hiring and training grants, right? Those tend to be non-repayable grants. When you're expanding your building and you're doing a huge business expansion, the government generally doesn't like to give you 100% non-repayable funding for millions and millions of dollars because it's a lot of risk for them. They like you to repay some of that government contribution from the revenues that you generate because of the expansion. So I guess my short answer to your question, Ramesh, is just if you're looking for non-repayable funding, look at R&D funding, opportunities like SHRED, IRAP, SD Tech, right? OCE, those are all non-repayable funding opportunities, as well as hiring and training grants, right? Canada Jobs Grants, great, Yves Landry AIM, etc. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Is there a question? Okay, so the question is, for SHRED tax credits, does it have to be a scientific technology that you're advancing, or it can be any other type of research? So the SHRED program is a CRA initiative, and they actually have a list of categories in which you're allowed to conduct SHRED work on, right? And they define the parameters as being you have to work in the field of science. So you can't do research in business or marketing or usability studies, for example. They're looking for advancements in computer science, physics, mathematics, statistics, polymer technology. There's a 2-page list of all the fields in which you can claim SHRED tax credits on. And I can go over that in great detail if you have any further questions. OCE? For OCE grants, they're looking for partnerships with universities and colleges. So as long as you have an agreement with a university or college to do work for you, it doesn't necessarily have to be science. I've seen some OCE grants for market research studies, for example, right? So it's a different initiative than for SHRED. Okay, I think I'm out of time now, is that correct? Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon and evening.